Like if you can imagine metaphorically that walking with God means something like, staying in close contact with the divine nature of being or something like that, and having ultimate faith in the positive nature of reality, things that might be damaged if you became self-conscious. Well, why would you stop believing in that, which would be to stop walking with God? And the answer to that is, well, you become aware of your own vulnerability and your own, finiteness, and that makes you afraid, so you hide. And that is what people do. They do that all the time. It's a chronic state of human existence that in many ways you hide from the best parts of yourself. And I mean, adolescence is usually like the painful acting out of that process over a protracted period of time. And people often never really recover from that. They won't bring their best forward because they're afraid. And they're afraid for good reason.
You're just after listening to a clip by Jordan Peterson. I think it's from a second or third lecture, the part 2 version on shamanic traditions in the 2014 series. And in this clip, basically it's a 2-hour lecture, so I just took a clip out of it. So before and after, he's talking about handling debt or dealing with debt. And he had a patient of his who was having difficulty dealing with debt or in any form or shape. And so they went to a undertakers to take a look at bodies and stuff like that. So basically what he's suggesting here is that human beings have an issue with dealing with death in different ways. So he opens up, or he begins by talking about how you shouldn't be a big mess if you're in a situation, say in your family or some close person is dying or near death, that you just fall apart and think about yourself. And that really, it's not a bad idea to become aware, like he did with his patient. He went to undertakers and so on. It's not a bad idea to future-proof yourself so that when you have to go to, it's very shocking the first time if you've ever gone to see a loved one in intensive care. And they don't look like they normally look, and they got all sorts of wires coming out of them and stuff. And that there's a shock value in that. That shock value can throw you off in life. And so it's good to prepare a little bit for dealing with these things because they're inevitable. That, things like aging parents, close friends, and also to some degree yourself as well, that we're all going to have to face death. We have to face death in others, and eventually we have to face death in ourselves. And he's talking as well about talking to the funeral director and about finitude. And of course, you're very well aware of the finiteness of life if you're working in undertakers, because you're seeing dead bodies all the time. So what I'd like is to expand on a little bit here about dealing with death or handling death, is that there's a bigger picture to this. If we talk from a point of view of Eastern esotericism, basically like Hinduism and Buddhism and so on, and if we talk about, say, meditation in general, there's a strong theme is preparation for death. We also see that if you are aware or have any ideas about the works of Carlos Castaneda, where he talks about shamanism. That's not the regular shamanism, it is Americanized, popularized version perhaps, and we don't know how much of it is true. But one theme that does run through his books is the idea of death and preparation of death. And the concept which I like with Carlos Castaneda is always that we should prepare for death and treat every day as our last, because you don't know when you're going to die. And there's a character in the Carlos Castaneda books called John Juan, I think it is. Anyway, this Don Juan guy, he basically says that the problem with people is they feel that they're immortal and that they swagger around with pride and ego. If people realize that at any time death could come, and they lived every life like it's their last, they lived in a kind of reality rather than full of ego, that they'd actually lead a better life, and a much better life, a much more self-aware life. So saying we get similar concepts in Eastern esotericism, the idea of being prepared for death. If we take meditation, for example, the idea of Eastern meditation is basically that every time you meditate, you go into deeper states of being, and it's actually preparation for death. That I'm not sure the Buddhists believe, but definitely the Hindu rishis and gurus believe that when you go into a deep state of meditation, it's the same as when you die. The difference is when you die, you don't come back, whereas in meditation, you do come back. So the person who meditates regularly, and if they can go into deep states of being regularly, they're kind of preparing for their death on a daily basis, and when death comes, there isn't a shock value. So there's a broader perspective of what Jordan Peterson's saying here. One level, I think it's very practical. I have seen people where they've fallen apart when their family members had health problems. And usually what happens in these cases is maybe one member of the family has to do everything because the other members are just falling apart. And I have seen that myself in some people I've known in my life, not my own close family, but other people I've seen, that the family would implode. And it puts a huge amount of pressure on one or two carers if the other people go into denial. And this is typically what happens. People go into a state of denial. They are so busy self-enwrapped with coping that they can't actually help. They're not a help to their dying parent or loved one, and they're sure as hell not a help to maybe whoever is caring for the person. So on a very practical level, we should learn to cope with death and learn to deal with the finitude of life so that when people need us, we can care for them. And there's an obvious long-term benefit that if we care for people on the way out, there's a good chance that somebody will care for us. We create a culture of care. And by and large, people are not very good at dealing with death or dealing with intensive care and all these sort of things. But it's something we need to really work on. On a deeper, more spiritual level that we can think about this is the idea of preparation for death in life. I remember we have a lot of monasteries in Ireland, for example, and I remember hearing one monastery, there was a tradition many years ago, but the Cistercian monastery, that these particular monks, they would lie in a casket every night instead of a bed so that they'd be ready for death. And I know that's a bit creepy and a bit over the top, but it's a good point that we basically wander around the place as if we're immortal and not aware of our own finitude. And we should be ready to deal with death. So on one level, if we can become more aware of our own death and comfortable with our own death, we will be able to help other people in our life when they have a crisis. On another level, it also helps ourselves that we can cope when we're in this situation. And just think of it this way, everybody on the planet dies. I mean, there isn't one person who hasn't died. Everybody dies. Everybody has to face death. Everybody has to face the death, illness and death of their loved ones. And eventually we all have to face our own death. So it makes sense that we should deal with or accept and be stoic about the concept of death. But there's no way you can deal with the concept of death without spending some time in a state of self-reflection. Without being able to self-reflect, you can't deal with these things, and then you're forced to deny them, which most people do. They go into a state of denial. And then on the deeper, yet third level, the deeper level, for the first level here is simply looking after others. Second level is preparing yourself for your own death. And the third level is the benefit that if you're aware of death and finitude, you're more likely to pursue things that matter to you. Because when you realize that you could die, you're less likely to waste your time doing bullshit things. And you're more likely to pursue things with passion because you know you won't be here for long. So whatever you got to do now. So I think it's an interesting concept of coping with death and loss and the difficulties of life. One level is to be there for the people. Another level is to be there for yourself, like as a mature human being. And the third level is to put fire under your belly, as it were, to make you do things. Because when you're realizing that you're not here for that long, you're more likely to give things a go. So just think about it, the importance of dealing with death. And if you're wondering about how to deal with death, that is a complex topic. But I suppose the most important thing I would say is that we have to start reflecting. And just what we're doing here right now in this video. And when we look at these concepts, just becoming aware of the reality that we're going to lose everybody around us. And they're going to lose us too someday. And that we're going to lose this life. And someday this life is over. Whether you believe in reincarnation or life after death or not, one thing's for sure, the life that you're leading now will end. And whether you continue on or not, it won't be the same person you used to be. You're not going to be this person with this lifetime, So if you're born, say, in 1980, for example, and you have all those memories of being a child and a young person in the 80s, 90s, wherever you go to an afterlife, reincarnation, or you simply cease to be, either way, you're not going back to that life. Whether you reincarnate, whether you go to heaven, whether you cease to exist, whatever you believe, you're sure as hell not going to go back to that life. So the life that you're leading now, this is also a good way of helping us insulate ourselves from things like feeling depressed. Death as a concept can be depressing, but think of it this way. If you start becoming aware of how precious your life is, you're less likely to want to go off and kill yourself or to do destructive things. You start realizing that all you can do, all you can guarantee now, because everything else is speculation what happens after you die, all you can do now is in your hands now today. This life you have today is the only one that you actually have. Maybe you existed before, maybe you exist in the future, you don't know for sure. But you know you have today. You know whatever you can do today. And someday you're going to have to let go of all those loved ones. And you have to accept that. And they're going to have to let go of you. And you're going to have to let go of this life. And the food you like, the movies, the TV shows, the memories even. You're going to have to let them all go. And so I'd hope that would make you feel more precious about them. And more precious about yourself. Rather than be full of recriminations that most people are full of. Because when we feel that we're going to live forever, we have recriminations. When we feel that maybe tomorrow I could die, we're more likely to appreciate what we have. Because it is special, actually. This life is special. You now here listening to this, you're special. And this is a special moment in your life. And every moment is special. Because any time it could end. And you're not going to get it back. So appreciate that. And start appreciating that. And that's a strange thing, is that finitude gives appreciation for life. It's a paradox. Okay, hope you like this video. Please like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you again next time.